Let me be direct. To the leaders of the Sinaloa Cartel, you are no longer the hunters. You are the hunted. You will be betrayed by your friends, you will be hounded by your enemies, and you will ultimately find yourself and your fates here in a courtroom in the Southern District of California.
Now that this cartel operatives in Mexico say they're worried about being arrested or even killed as Trump cracks down on our southern border.
Cartel operatives have reportedly had to move labs to other parts of the country or temporarily stop production. Other cartel members are becoming more afraid of being arrested or even killed.
You can't be calm. You can't even sleep because you don't know when they'll catch you. Those were the exact words of a high-ranking Sinaloa cartel operative, speaking to the New York Times just shortly after Trump issued his most aggressive border strike order yet. Since that moment, cartel leaders have abandoned their fortresses and gone into hiding. Trump has been disappearing them one by one, and the few who are left, they can't even sleep with both eyes closed. Some even sent their families away for safety. Then they vanished deep into the jungles. They all know Trump is coming for them. What they don't know is when, and that's what makes it even more terrifying. So now, everyone's asking the same questions. Is this finally the beginning of the end of the cartels? Or are the cartels planning something even more dangerous? And what exactly did Trump do to bring these dangerous criminals to their knees? The clock started ticking for the Sinaloa Cartel the moment Trump returned to the White House in January 2025, and everyone knew it, from the highest levels of the Mexican government to the most dangerous cartel leaders. Trump gave them 30 days. Either Mexico shuts down the flood of fentanyl and migrants pouring into the US, or he slams the country with 25% tariffs. And this wasn't just a threat. Trump made it crystal clear that he wasn't backing down. Instead, he will apply more pressure.
And it's only got a 100% chance of working, because if that doesn't work, I'll make it 50. And if that doesn't work, I'll make it 75 for the tough guys, and I'll make it 100. Then I'll make it 100. And at some point, they'll have so many soldiers on their southern border. You know, their southern border is where they come in. They come right through.
Just 2 weeks into his presidency, panic had already started spreading through the highest levels of the Mexican government. President Claudia Sheinbaum, who took office just months earlier, was suddenly forced into crisis mode. She wasn't about to let her economy crash on her watch, so she deployed 10,000 National Guard troops racing toward the US border. But she didn't stop there. She also ordered hundreds of heavily armed soldiers to storm the state of Sinaloa, the heartland of fentanyl production and home to the Sinaloa Cartel's most powerful leaders. Within days, the message became very clear. Mexico was finally ready to take back its country from the cartel. According to the Mexican Security Minister, Omar Harfuch, every day there have been arrests and seizures, and they have the numbers to prove it. In just 5 months, authorities seized almost as much fentanyl as they had the entire previous year, but that was only the beginning. Next, they went straight for the cartel's eyes, tearing down more than 400 surveillance cameras hidden across Culiacan. By the next month, they'd already taken down 113 synthetic drug labs, nearly 900 arrests in Sinaloa alone since October. That was a full-blown crackdown because it didn't just stop at arrests. 29 cartel figures were yanked out of Mexico and flown straight to US prisons in what is now regarded as the largest extradition of cartel figures in the last decade. Among them was Rafael Caro Quintero, the same man behind the brutal torture and murder of DEA agent Kiki Camarena back in the 1980s. To date, the mention of his name still makes American agents grit their teeth. Others on that extradition list included Omar and Miguel Trevino Morales, the blood-soaked brothers who ran the Zetas with military precision. According to former DEA agent Brian Townsend, nothing like this has ever happened before.
This is unprecedented, and this is good for DEA, and this is good for America. These are violent criminals who are preying on our communities with illicit drugs like fentanyl, killing thousands of Americans every year. And nothing like this has ever happened before. We are excited to see this type of activity going on.
By handing over the drug lords, Mexico wanted Trump to see this and say, all right, that's enough. But to their rude shock, Trump wasn't satisfied. He didn't just want arrests and extraditions. Those were business as usual. He wanted Mexico to dismantle the cartels and obliterate them from the surface of the earth. And if Mexico couldn't finish the job, then Washington would send in US special forces to cross the border and finish it themselves. That was the moment cartel bosses realized there was fire on the mountain. And what they did next will leave you speechless. Before the first American boot ever touched Mexican soil, the cartels had already started to fall apart from the inside. You'd expect these hardened criminals to stand their ground and put up a fight, but instead, they vanished. Safe houses were emptied. Drug labs were abandoned mid-cook. Some of them reportedly started selling off their properties. Others fired their logistics teams and ditched anyone they didn't absolutely need. Two young fentanyl producers working directly for the Sinaloa Cartel told the New York Times that they had already shut down their operations and left town because, according to them, you don't know when they'll come for you. Another Sinaloa Cartel member told the reporters, "The most important thing now is to survive." Those are coming from the men who've controlled Mexico's narco trade with violence for decades. The same men have walked the streets with gold-plated pistols, burned down villages, and bribed government officials. The same men who decided who lived, who died, and who disappeared without a trace. But now, they have become the prey. And to make things worse, the authorities were hunting them on all fronts: land, sea, and air. American spy drones, including CIA Reapers, were flying deep into Mexican airspace. They weren't just watching from a distance. They were scanning cartel labs, mapping compounds, and tracking every move in real time. And if Trump gave the order, U.S. Special Forces, Stryker teams, Blackhawks, Strykers, and elite tactical units were all in position just a few miles from the border.
Fox got this exclusive first look inside one of these Strykers. We want to show you this video here. These 8-wheeled armor vehicles, they are positioned to give a bird's eye view over the border. This one that we got to look at overlooks the Juarez, Mexico area, a major smuggling corridor known for its high number of gotaways, illegal migrants who manage to escape Border Patrol agents. Strykers could be armed with cannons or machine guns to fight enemies.
Nothing like this has been seen at the border in over a decade, and that's why the cartels are terrified. One cartel leader told the New York Times that he's now trying to figure out how to protect his own family if an American helicopter drops out of the sky. Cartel bosses have now started spending serious money on drone detection systems and hiring experts to monitor U.S. aerial activity. Others are smuggling in more weapons from the U.S., trying to stack up just in case the unthinkable happens. Still, many of them admitted the truth. Even with IEDs, landmines, and military-grade weapons, they could never match the firepower of the U.S. military. One cartel operative tried to sound tough when he said, "If a helicopter comes here and soldiers drop out, 20 or 30 of them, we won't sit with our arms crossed." He's trying to convince himself that they'll fight back, even though deep down inside, he knows they're outgunned, out-trained, and out-planned. But that was just the beginning, because while they were scrambling for safety, the US government was preparing to hit them with something far more devastating. So, as many of you already know, back in February 2025, the Trump administration officially labeled the Sinaloa Cartel, the CJNG, and several other violent groups as foreign terrorist organizations. But what came next? That caught the cartels completely off guard, because just a few weeks later, federal prosecutors in Southern California dropped a bombshell. They filed the first ever narco-terrorism charges against two top Sinaloa cartel leaders. Now, the crazy part is that the defendants were actually father and son. One, Pedro Inzunza Noriega, and his son. Authorities say they weren't just trafficking narcotics, they were running a massive empire stretching across Mexico, Guatemala, Panama, and Costa Rica. But this time, the charges against them went way beyond narco-trafficking. Prosecutors accused them of supporting terrorism, and that is actually more serious than it sounds. And that was only the beginning. Almost simultaneously, the US Treasury Department delivered another crushing blow. They labeled El Chapo's sons, known as Los Chapitos, as specially designated global terrorists. That meant their assets were frozen, their businesses were blacklisted, and anyone caught doing business with them, even indirectly, could be punished too. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent didn't sugarcoat it.
If you act like a terrorist, you shouldn't be surprised if you are charged as one.
So now it might feel like we're finally getting close to the final chapter of the bloody history of Mexican cartels. Some of the biggest drug lords are behind bars. Their compounds are empty. Their labs are torched. The Mexican military is hunting them down, while US prosecutors are going after them with everything they've got. Even their bank accounts are frozen. Their networks and smuggling routes disrupted. Their top men extradited, arrested, or forced into hiding. So now, everyone is asking, will this finally be the end of the cartels? Well, the answer to that question is not as simple, and we'll tell you why. You see, cartels don't operate like traditional organizations. They're not built on one man at the top. When one boss is taken out, another quietly takes his place. When a route gets shut down, they find 10 others. And when a lab is destroyed, they rebuild even more sophisticated ones, sometimes in a new country entirely, sometimes deep inside the mountains, or even underground. We have seen this happen over and over again to know it's a pattern. When El Chapo was captured in 2016 and sentenced to life in prison, the world thought it was the end of an era. But not even 2 years later, his sons, Los Chapitos, were running the same empire with even more aggression. They turned Sinaloa into the global capital of synthetic opioids, flooding the US with deadly fentanyl while staying one step ahead of every agency tracking them. And when the Zetas were broken apart by the military, their lieutenants didn't retire. They simply rebranded into the Northeast Cartel, shifting their operations into extortion, oil theft, and political manipulation. And we can go on and on. You see, these groups evolve like viruses. They adapt to pressure, they mutate under threat, and they've learned how to use fragmentation to their advantage, splitting into smaller cells that are harder to track, more agile, and even more violent. Even now, while some bosses are in hiding, others are quietly investing in new technology, exploring ways to move product through semi-submersible submarines. They've started building fentanyl labs outside Mexico, in places like Guatemala and Panama, where US intelligence coverage is thinner and local authorities are easier to buy off. It's no longer just a Mexican problem, it's a regional industry backed by global demand, Chinese precursor chemicals, and billions in profits. And here's where things get even more complicated. Some of these cartels are now embedding themselves into legitimate businesses like farming, mining, trucking, even politics. In some areas, they've become the shadow government, providing loans, jobs, security, and bribes to people who feel abandoned by the state. So even if Trump's strike order dismantles their leadership, even if the US kills or captures more of their leaders, it won't erase the roots they've grown deep into society. That's why former US Ambassador to Mexico Christopher Landau warned that labeling them terrorists, while symbolically powerful, doesn't solve the deeper problem. He said, "You can't just cut off the head of the snake, you have to burn the nest." And right now, that nest stretches across multiple countries, hundreds of politicians, and millions of dollars in legitimate-looking trade. So what does that mean? Well, it simply means this fight is far from over. It means these cartels might shrink in the short term, but come back smarter, faster, and even more dangerous in the long run. And that's the real danger here, because if the US and Mexico don't stay 10 steps ahead, if they think a few high-profile arrests and a handful of sanctions are enough, then what we'll see next might not be the end of the cartel era, but the birth of a more terrifying generation of criminal networks. Please share your thoughts with us in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more in-depth videos like this. Meanwhile, click on any of the cards on your screen right now to watch more of our videos.